Hey, everybody. Welcome to tonight's webinar. My name is Ben Jackson. For those who don't know me, I am the co-founder of Upsolve, and I'm somebody who owes much of who I am today and what I have today to the truly miraculous process that is bankruptcy. For those who haven't heard my story before, I once had $60,000 in credit card debt, and I was only making $20,000 a year driving for Uber and Lyft, and the math just didn't add up. And bankruptcy was the thing that kind of set me free and put me on the path to the middle class. Put me in the position where I can share what I have with you today. So I'm excited to get into this. This is a question and answer format webinar. So we do have some questions that have come in the chat already. We'll have additional questions that come in as we go forward. I'm going to go through a few of the questions that I already have now, and then we'll jump into the more structured format with some general topics about bankruptcy, who it's for, how it works, how to decide if it's for you. And then we'll get into the open question and answer a little bit later. So thanks for taking the time to join me here tonight. Now, if you are here, chances are you or somebody you love is struggling with debt, and you're not alone in that. There are literally millions of people in the United States. Some estimates are over 100 million people in the United States who are struggling significantly with debt, and they're feeling stuck. So if you're feeling stuck, or if you're wondering if Chapter 7 bankruptcy could be your next step, you're not alone, and we're going to cover that in this webinar. Now, a quick heads up, I did originally plan this webinar to be with Upsolve's Director of Bankruptcy, Claire Robinson. Unfortunately, she had a scheduling conflict tonight, some travel issues. You guys know how that goes. But we're still going to walk through everything that she and I had planned to cover step by step. And by the end of this session, you're going to have a much clearer sense of whether bankruptcy might be right for you. And we're going to get to that answer through covering a few specific things. Number one, who qualifies for Chapter 7 bankruptcy? Number two, how Upsolve works, the nonprofit that I co-founded, and how you can file with Upsolve without a lawyer. Three, the common mistakes to avoid when filing bankruptcy. Four, what happens after you file bankruptcy. And then five, how to rebuild your financial life after bankruptcy. And as I mentioned, we're going to have a live Q&A at the end. And I actually already got one question in the chat. So Cherie, just since you've been waiting so patiently for this, I'm going to go ahead and throw this up and we'll answer it now. So if I'm in a domestic partnership, do I still have to include him? And if we have no shared debt? Okay, so great question. If you are in a domestic partnership, whether or not you have to include the partner's debts on your bankruptcy filing depends on whether those are shared or joint debts, meaning if you're a cosigner on their debt or vice versa, they're a cosigner on yours, that would indicate that you would need to include it on the bankruptcy. Or in some instances, if you're a spouse and there's some sort of clause in their contract that indicates that it passes to you for whatever reason, that's very, very rare. But generally speaking, unless they are a cosigner on the loan or you are a cosigner on their loan, you don't have to include each other's debts in your bankruptcy. Doesn't matter if it's domestic partnership, it's just about co-signing. So for example, if you were a co-signer on your mom's loan, or actually let's flip it, if your mom was a co-signer on your loans and you filed bankruptcy, there's a chance that your mom would actually still be responsible for that debt. Vice versa, if she filed bankruptcy and you were a co-signer on hers, you could potentially still be reliable for her debt. So for this domestic partnership relationship, Cherie, you would only include him if you're a co-signer. Now, one, I guess, sort of caveat on top of that that's not related to debt would be related to income. So when you report income, if that domestic partner of yours contributes significantly to your household income and your expenses, then you would include them in your income calculation, but not in your debt calculation. I hope that answers your question. If you have further as we go, we'll get to that. So great, seeing a few more questions coming in. This is awesome. Thanks so much, everybody, for being active here. So let's jump into a couple more things and I'll answer the rest of these questions. So for those who haven't heard this from us in the past, what exactly is Chapter 7 bankruptcy? So we'll talk through some of the basics here. Chapter 7 bankruptcy is a legal process. So it's something that you do through the legal system and allows you to eliminate most types of unsecured debt. Now, this would be things like credit card balances, personal loans, payday loans, and medical bills. If you qualify for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, it can give you a clean slate, which is why we sometimes call it the fresh start bankruptcy, because you start over as relates to that kind of debt. So Chapter 7 bankruptcy is meant for people who truly can't afford to repay what they owe. So if you're making just enough to cover basic living expenses and you're falling deeper into debt, then Chapter 7 might be for you. And that was exactly the case for me. I had all this debt. I've been trying for years to pay it off. I had businesses that were working out and then didn't work out. I would make a little bit of progress on it and then I would fall further in. And I realized after, 3-4 years of struggling with this that I needed something more. I needed a more dramatic solution, and Chapter 7 proved to be that for me. I couldn't do it on my own, and Chapter 7 was a great option there. Could be for you as well. So if you want to file Chapter 7 bankruptcy, you need to pass something called the means test, which compares your income to your state's median income and looks at your ability to repay debt after covering essentials. So Cherie, to your earlier question, your domestic partner's income might matter to whether or not you can pass the means test if they're contributing to your household expenses. And when you go through the Upsolve application, if you do choose to file bankruptcy with our help, it can help you understand if you pass the means test or not. Now, most people who use Upsolve do pass the means test and do qualify, but the tool will help you figure out if that's the case for you. So let's talk about how this tool actually works. I'm going to pull up, do a quick screen share here. Give me one moment, and we will take a look at this together. And while I do this, Grubby, I'm going to answer Grubby Soil. I love that name. I'm going to answer your quick question here. One moment while I pull this up. Okay. And we're going to go screen share here. Boom. Okay, great. So Grubby Soil asks, what would your household size income be if you're only one filing for bankruptcy, but you're claimed as a dependent and live with your family? Would your household size be 1 or the number of people that you're living with? Let me just make sure I'm following that. So you're living with multiple people, but you're the only one filing for bankruptcy and you are claimed as a dependent and live with family. So this is a tricky question, Grubby Soil. Typically what you would need to do is you would need to calculate the percentage of your expenses that the percentage of your expenses that your family member covers. So for example, if you are living in a space that would cost, let's say, $500 a month to rent, and somebody else is paying that $500 for you by letting you live there for free, you would count that as part of your income, if you will. Same thing for your food if they're helping to pay for your food. If they're not contributing anything towards your monthly expenses, then it wouldn't matter. Your household size when filing would be just yourself because you don't have any dependents, but your income would still be the amount that's contributed to by the rest of the people in your household. Great question. Let me know if that doesn't answer that for you. I'll throw it up on the screen here for everybody else to see while we jump into this next section. Okay, so you're considering filing bankruptcy. You go to upsolve.org and you want to see if you're eligible. We have this handy debt screener here that you can click on that'll help you choose from between multiple different debt relief options. But if you decide that bankruptcy is the one that's right for you, you can actually head on over to this URL here, upsolve.org/bankruptcy, and take the screener. And the way this is going to work is you're going to answer some really basic questions about your financial situation. So we'll say your zip code. You're going to say whether you filed bankruptcy in the last 8 years, because whether or not you can file depends on the most recent discharge that you got. You're going to answer how much debt you have, how many people are in your household, all the people who rely on you for money in your house. So again, Grubby, if you look at this specific clause, is the people who rely on you for money. So if no one relies on you for money, great. You just put yourself, household size of 1. But again, your household's contributions to your expenses, so the people that own the place where you live and that claim you as a dependent, you would include that as income contribution later on. Is your household, so like right here, for example, is your monthly income greater than $6,900? So let's say you make nothing and your household contributes $3,000 a month towards your food and housing, you'd answer no in this instance. If they contributed $7,000, you would answer yes. Have you filed a tax return with the IRS? You have to have filed, so we're going to say yes, I did. Are you married to a spouse who also wants to file? We'll talk about this later. Do you own any real estate? What this question is trying to figure out is, do you have any property that the trustee could take in a bankruptcy filing, sell it, and use to repay your creditors? So if I'd said yes to that, it would have indicated that I couldn't file for free with Upsolve, because if that is the case and you do have expensive property, it's often safer for you to go work with an attorney, and we'll make a referral to an attorney for a free bankruptcy evaluation if that applies to you during the screener. So we're going to say no to this. I don't have any substantial property, no personal injury claim. Student loans. This is a question we get frequently. We'll probably talk a little bit about this later. But student loans contrary to popular opinion, actually can be discharged in bankruptcy in some instances. It's tricky. It's only very specific circumstances, but the tool will help determine if those circumstances apply to you. And if they do, we can help you get out of that student loan debt through bankruptcy. We've actually had about $1.5 million of student loan debt that have gotten discharged so far this year. Actually, it might even be just this month. I can't remember exactly, but definitely something that can be done. So we're going to say no to this for my question. Actually, I'll go ahead and say yes. So you can see if they're older than 10 years, and then one of the hardship criteria applies. So we're going to say yes to this. Just a confirmation that it can't erase these types of debts in bankruptcy. This is really important. If you have spousal support, child support, or debt from a DUI, it can't get discharged. These are non-dischargeable debts. So we're going to say I still want to use it. If you have those things, you can still use the tool. It doesn't necessarily like preclude you from being able to use it. You just need to understand that you can't erase those things. So if those are your primary reason for filing might not be the right fit for you. Okay, great. You seem like a good fit. Go ahead and get started. Next thing you're going to do is create an account. And then once you've created an account, you're going to go ahead and be able to log in. And there's going to be a portal. I won't be able to show it to you now because I'd have to actually create a new account here. But you'd be able to create a portal that will walk you step by step through the questions in the bankruptcy application. And at the end of each section, it'll actually show you, all the answers that you provided. It'll give you hints if anything looks wrong. And ultimately, at the end, what will happen is a paralegal on our team will review your application, and you'll communicate back and forth with them in an online portal about anything that looks wrong in the app, assuming nothing does, which of course is not going to happen. You're going to do this right the first time. Then the paralegal will release the forms to you. You'll get them typically within about 2 weeks or so of when you start the process, often faster. It really depends on how long it takes you to respond to any questions the paralegals ask. So that's Upsolve. Again, you can find it at upsolve.org. Really powerful tool. I definitely wish that I'd had this when I filed bankruptcy. It would have taken me, 2 weeks to get the forms done instead of the 6 months or so that it took. Really helpful to do that with support. Okay, let's jump back in over here. So as I mentioned before, Upsolve, entirely free. We are a nonprofit. We're funded by generous donations from foundations, also from some of the evaluation fees. If you end up not working with Upsolve and you end up needing to speak with a lawyer, and we send you over to them, they will pay us a placement fee for connecting you with them. So we do have that option, as I mentioned, but our services are always entirely free to you. You can think of this tool as being like TurboTax, but for bankruptcy. So if you're familiar with that, really simple questions that ultimately fill out your forms. All right, let's move on here to some additional questions. So I've gotten questions from people numerous times about very common mistakes that people make when they're filing bankruptcy. Really, the main one is not having the right documents. So let's talk about those. First, you're going to need your last 2 years of tax returns. You're going to need recent pay stubs or proof of income. You're going to need bank statements that show how much money you have, how much money you tend to spend. And then you're going to need a list of all of your debts and assets. You're going to have to complete a credit counseling course, which is a course where you kind of go through budgeting, making sure you understand bankruptcy, making sure you understand how to stay, financially stable once your bankruptcy happens and your debt goes away. And that that course will issue you a certificate that you're going to upload during this workflow and ultimately file with your bankruptcy forms. And the Upsolve tool will actually help you get connected with a credit counseling course. So let's talk about some more mistakes that I often see here. One is leaving out your creditors or your debts when you do your application. So we do actually pull down your credit report. So we'll have a pretty good understanding of what your debts are. But sometimes people just forget to put them on their forms, especially if they don't work with Upsolve and they don't have that credit report coming down. Leaving creditors or debts off of your bankruptcy could potentially result in those debts not getting discharged. Now, it's uncommon. Often you can amend your filing to include those if you notice that you forgot them. But if you are concerned about that, definitely suggest working with Upsolve's tool so that it doesn't happen. Next would be guessing on your income or assets and having significantly more income and assets than you actually write down. That can be a risk because you can end up in a situation where the trustee ends up taking some of those assets or some of that income that you didn't expect. And maybe you wouldn't have filed had you known that that was a risk. So, you want to make sure that you list all of the income and assets that you actually have during the filing process so you can really understand what the risk is to you. You got to take a drink here. Talking constantly with no break. It's a whole thing. Not completing the credit counseling is something that we often see, but again, if you work with Upsolve, typically isn't a risk. Failing to review your forms carefully before filing. This is a huge one. Now, this doesn't happen usually with Upsolve filers because we give you a really thorough set of instructions on what you need to sign, what you need to make sure you include, and we also review your forms for you prior to sending them to you. But if you file on your own, there are upwards of 100 plus pages of these forms in some instances. When I filed bankruptcy back in 2016, I think I had like 1,000 pages because I didn't know what I was doing. I had forms from different states. I had like all sorts of assets and income statements that I didn't need, tax returns from every year ever. And ultimately, it ended up being very confusing to me. I ended up messing things up several times. The clerk had to do a bunch of corrections when I went in. Thankfully, they were nice, which is often the case, actually. People think bankruptcy clerks are going to be mean. They're usually really nice and they'll help. But not having the right forms, not signing everything correctly can often create challenges with your app, which again is part of the value of Upsolve in that we help you do all of that so you don't have to worry about it. So the most important thing to remember when you're doing your application is be honest and be thorough. Bankruptcy is a legal process and mistakes can happen. But if they look like intentional omissions, especially as it relates to your assets, it can cause you delays or even get your case dismissed. All right. So what happens after you file bankruptcy? First thing that's going to happen is the court is going to assign a case number to your case and give you a bankruptcy trustee. And they're going to schedule a short meeting called a 341 meeting, which is the meeting of creditors. It usually happens over the phone and it takes about 10 minutes. No judge, no courtroom drama. And then when I filed, I was like, oh my God, I got to put on my Sunday best and go into court and it's going to be a whole thing. And I was sweating and it was a piece of cake. Trustee is really nice. It's not about gotchas. It's just about making sure that what you put on your forms is accurate and that you do, in fact, mean the things that you say. Like you really do need the relief of bankruptcy. About 60 to 90 days after that meeting, you get your court discharge. Woo! And this is the best feeling ever. It's a piece of paper that says your debts are gone and your life can start over. All right. So how do you know if bankruptcy is right for you? So this is actually really, really hard. And I think for most people, this is the hardest part about filing bankruptcy. Deciding to actually file. It often takes people years to admit that their debt situation isn't sustainable and that the things that they're trying to do to get out of debt aren't working. I know that was absolutely the case for me. It's been the case for a couple of my friends, and it's the case for probably most of the Upsolve users that I talk to. They say, man, I wish that I had done this like 5 years ago instead of continuing to grind and grind and grind and try to pay it off and get further and further behind and all of this. It can be really hard though, because you have to get over the stigma because, a lot of people think bankruptcy is shameful. It's definitely not. Like there are tons and tons and tons of very successful people who have filed bankruptcy. And I don't consider myself very successful, but I'm successful, right? Like I'm living in a house right now that I bought a few years after filing bankruptcy. And I think of that as success. Like having a house in the United States is success. And I filed bankruptcy and it was a key to being able to get there. I wouldn't have had I not filed bankruptcy. And that's the case for a lot of people. So you have to, one, come to terms with that and admit that to yourself. But here are a few signs to look for that bankruptcy could be the right move for you. First is you're only making minimum payments and your balance on your credit cards never goes down. I don't have the math in front of me, but I think the last time I looked at it, making the average minimum payments on a $15,000 credit card debt means you end up paying like $325,000. These minimum payments are not your friend. They're designed to keep you in debt forever and keep paying credit to the credit card companies. Stay away from them. But if you only can make your minimum payments, that's a pretty good sign that you might need relief from bankruptcy. Number two, if you're relying on your credit cards to cover your basic needs like groceries or gas, Or maybe you've stopped opening your mail or answering calls from unknown numbers because you're worried about collectors. That was a thing for me. Maybe you've considered taking money from your retirement account to pay your debts. Definitely a thing. I did that. I wish that I hadn't. You've been sued or your wages are being garnished. So if any of those things sound familiar to you, bankruptcy might not be a failure. It could be a lifeline for you. It might be like the best thing that you could do to take control of your finances and make sure that the money that you're bringing in actually matters to you. You can use it to build savings. You can use it to build wealth. If you're paying all of your money to creditors through minimum payments, all those things are out of reach for you. And honestly, like the American dream is too. So that can be a good sign that you should file bankruptcy. Now, I shouldn't say should. Should is a personal choice, but it can be a good sign that bankruptcy might be a good option for you. Okay, so let's talk through some of the common questions now. I've been seeing some more come in the chat. Okay, let's see here. This is another question from Cherie. Cherie says this is her domestic partner. He owns the house and pays the mortgage. I pay the utilities. No cosigns at all. I've already started on your site. Awesome. Really glad to hear that you've started on our site, Cherie. Get stuck on spouse questions. I find it fairly easy as debts and credit cards. Amazing. Okay. So for your situation where your domestic partner owns the house and pays the mortgage, you would just need to figure kind of like what is the fair value of your portion of that. So if you were, say, paying for rent for the size, space, room, whatever you have, what would the average value of that be in your neighborhood? So let's say it's $1,000. You would write $1,000 down as part of your income as an outside contribution from your domestic partner. But you wouldn't need to list his debts unless you were a cosigner on them and vice versa. So you pay the utilities. You could also offload that contribution to his household expenses. So that cost of the utilities that you pay would reduce your income further by increasing your expenses. So his, again, just to be clear, with no cosign between you and him, the only thing that matters in that relationship is the income and expenses. So great question. You wouldn't list him as a spouse though. All right. What should you do if you cosign on a car? How will it affect the other person? This is a good question. So they're still responsible for the debt. It shouldn't harm them at all as long as they're making their payments still. So your portion of that, your responsibility for the debt goes away. Their responsibility for the debt stays. You should be good to go. There should be no repossession that happens unless they have not been paying the debt. Okay, let's see what other questions we have here. Similar question to the last one. Will I lose my car or home if I file for bankruptcy? This is one of the biggest myths of bankruptcy, and it keeps way too many people stuck in debt. Like, this was a thing for me when I filed. I was really worried about this. Now, the truth is that most people keep their car and their home when they file bankruptcy. As long as you're current on your payments and your property fits within your state's exemptions, you're likely in the clear as relates to cars and also as relates to homes. Now, if there's a home involved, I should be clear, Upsolve is not able to help you file for free, but we can make a free referral to a bankruptcy attorney who may be able to help you protect that home in your filing. But cars, generally speaking, unless you have something super lavish, you can usually move forward and keep that car post-bankruptcy. Next question here. How long will bankruptcy stay on my credit? I'm getting these in other channels, so I'm going to drop them here in the chat so everybody can see them. Great question. So how long will bankruptcy stay on my credit? Don't let the number for this scare you. It doesn't mean that your credit is frozen for a decade. Chapter 7 shows on your credit report for 10 years, but most people start rebuilding their credit within a year after filing. Some people qualify for credit cards or loans in 12 to 24 months, and sometimes it's even faster than that. Like, I think I was getting secured credit card offers in the mail like 3 days after I filed bankruptcy. That's probably an exaggeration, but it came through really quickly after I filed. Next one here. Does bankruptcy wipe out all of my debts? Not quite, but it does take out the most dangerous kinds first. So it's going to clear most unsecured debts, credit cards, medical bills, and payday loans, those types of things. But things like student loans, recent taxes, or child support usually stick with you. Most debts that matter to people, if you get rid of those debts, the other debts that don't get discharged are much easier to deal with in many cases. Question here from Mary Gunderson. Is it better to file Chapter 7 before this year's taxes or after? I have not done 2024 yet. This is a tricky question, Mary. I'm glad that you asked this. This depends really on whether or not you think you would get a refund that's going to be protected by bankruptcy exemptions. So, in most cases, it's safer to wait until after you file. But again, that does depend on your refund. So, let's say that you get and again, we're getting pretty close to the point where you have to have filed the 2024 taxes. So, if you filed on, say, the 16th of April, then you would have had to have filed your 2024 taxes, and you wouldn't be able to file bankruptcy until you did so. But between now and when those taxes are due, if you think you're going to get back, let's say, $10,000 as a tax refund, odds are there's not going to be a state exemption that would cover that $10,000. And so in that instance, you might want to wait to file. Then again, though, that $10,000, maybe it's going to get, have the same outcome post filing bankruptcy. So it kind of depends. But if it's like $500, you can look at your state's bankruptcy exemptions. You can go to Upsolve's website. You can search for, my state name, bankruptcy exemption. You can also go to your state's bankruptcy court website, search for that, see what the amount is for wildcard or cash. And if you think that the amount of your tax return plus any other property that you have is under those amounts, then it can be fine to file before you get that tax refund. But again, it is kind of tricky, and that's the consideration there. We have more articles on our website about that if you have further questions. Okay, next question here. Let me throw this in the chat. How much does it cost to file bankruptcy? Now, this is actually what stops most people from even looking into bankruptcy, but it's actually way cheaper than staying in debt. Now, there's a couple different types of fees. There's the court fee of $338, and that's it. That's all that you have to pay for the court. If you file with an attorney, the cost can be $2,000 to $5,000, and that can feel prohibitive. So when I was thinking about filing bankruptcy, I thought, I'm going to have to pay $2,000 to $3,000. How long is it going to take me to save that up? This, another 6-7 months. I'm going to be further in debt. I didn't file because I thought I was going to have to pay for that, until I realized that I could file for free on my own, what's called pro se, for only that $338 filing fee. Now, if you work with Upsolve to file your bankruptcy application, totally free. You get all of the help and support. You only have to pay that $338 filing fee. Now, people ask us all the time, what's the success rate, right? Like, how likely is it that this is going to work if I use Upsolve versus if I work with an attorney? And that's a great question, right? Like, if you're doing something free versus something with a professional, you want to understand if it's going to be safe to do or if it's going to be worth your money to work with an attorney. So I dug into these numbers the other day, actually, and on average, an Upsolve filer has a 95% success rate, meaning 95% of the cases that are prepared with Upsolve ultimately get a discharge and get that free, clean slate from their debt. With a bankruptcy attorney, it ends up being around a 96.7% difference, 96.7% success rate. So a little more successful, but you do have to pay that $2,000 to $5,000. And a lot of people feel that like that extra 1.7 to 2% increase in success isn't worth the additional fees. And if that's the case for you, there are roughly 17,000 people that have gone through the Upsolve process that agreed with you that had successful filings. Now, if you do this on your own without Upsolve or without any additional support, the average nationwide success rate for that is about 67%. So you're close to 30% more likely to get a successful discharge by filing with support through a system like Upsolve or filing with an attorney than doing it on your own. I was really fortunate, but I could have not been when I filed on my own. It was really difficult for me to do. We've made it much easier with Upsolve. All right, another question here. I don't have to file taxes due to my income. Should I get them done for bankruptcy filing purposes? So if you're not required to file your taxes, then it shouldn't matter when you do your bankruptcy application. The question set is going to say, like, have you filed the most recent taxes that you were required to file? If you weren't required to file and you don't file, you should be good to go. Great question, Cherie. Grubby says, does Upsolve allow you to choose between federal and state exemptions? Yes, we do. So if your state allows it, so in the filing process, you'll see whether that's the case for your state, and you'll be able to choose, and you'll see how those different exemptions cover your property differently, so you can make the most informed choice for yourself. Great question, Grubby. All right. And I recognize we're close to time here. I'm going to keep going. Feel free if you want to stay on the webinar. I'm happy to stay here. Got a lot of good questions today. Okay, let's see what else we've got here. This is an important one. I'm going to go ahead and show this on the chat. There we go. Will my employer find out about my bankruptcy? This could be really scary, right? Like thinking about bankruptcy, I know some people feel that it's shameful. Maybe people work in a profession that bankruptcy on their record, could change professional licensure or affect that or something like that. So this is one that actually people think about a lot. So if you're wondering if your employer will find out about your bankruptcy, let's dig into this. So usually, most times your employer won't be notified unless they're directly involved in your bankruptcy. So this would be like a wage garnishment situation where they're taking money out of your check to pay garnishment lawsuits that have happened against you because of creditors that have sued you. For most people, though, the bankruptcy stays completely under the radar. So if you're super concerned about this, generally speaking, it doesn't end up in front of your employer. All right, next question here. Can bankruptcy stop wage garnishments or lawsuits? This is one of the most immediate and powerful protections that bankruptcy gives you. Absolutely, yes, it can stop wage garnishments or lawsuits. Filing triggers something called an automatic stay, which is a crazy word. Why don't we just call this something easier? Automatic stay. But what that is it legally stops most collection efforts against you, including lawsuits and wage garnishments and even some evictions right away. So if you're struggling with those things and you're really in a financial predicament, filing bankruptcy can give you some breathing room. All right, we got a question from Mary here. My lease is up in August and I will be moving. Let me see if I can look at your last question. Is it better to file before this year's taxes or after? Mary, if you could add some additional context to that, I'm not totally certain I follow, but I would love to answer that for you if I can. Plug here for Liquid Death, by the way. I promise I'm not drinking a beer. This is a seltzer water. If you've never had Liquid Death, not a sponsor or something like that, I absolutely love Liquid Death. It's delicious. All right. Do I have to go? Oh, there we go, Mary. I will be moving from my apartment with will the bankruptcy cause issues? Great question. So this depends on whether your new landlord is going to do a credit check and would care about bankruptcy. Often, this is not an issue for people. Generally speaking, and even if it is, even if you have a credit challenge, if you have enough cash to make a security deposit, sometimes what you'll see is they'll say like, okay, instead of first month's and a deposit, give me first and last month's and a deposit. That's what happened to me post-filing. But if there's no credit check involved in your application, and they're not asking about creditworthiness, they're just asking for deposits, it won't affect your apartment renting at all. And in fact, what a lot of people find is that if they do have a situation where their credit needs to be improved, filing for their renting, filing bankruptcy first, getting out of debt, getting all that bad debt off their credit report, a month or two later of good credit habits, getting credit builder loans, something like that, their credit score actually typically goes up significantly and they can be in a better position for getting an apartment. So Mary, glad you asked that question. We have additional articles on our website about that as well. I see, you said in signing for a new apartment. It shouldn't cause an issue when you're signing for a new apartment to have a bankruptcy on your record unless the landlord does a credit check and the bankruptcy dropped your credit score below the amount that they would want to see. Great question. Okay. Do I have to go to court if I file with Upsolve? Do I have to go to court if I file with Upsolve? Throw this in the chat so everybody can see it. I know I was thinking about this when I filed. I was like, what is this court process going to look like? So if you're picturing like a really dramatic court scene where you go in and the judge is like, I object, don't. It doesn't happen like that. You won't actually face a judge in your bankruptcy filing. with one rare exception, if you do choose to do what's called a reaffirmation of your car loan. So you say, like, I want to keep making a payment on this car loan after a bankruptcy, so I want it to survive the bankruptcy. In some instances, you appear before a judge to basically state your case. Like, I need this car so that I can keep driving Uber for a living. Great, case closed. I did that when I filed, but 90% of the time, people don't end up seeing a judge at all. And if they do see a judge, it's not usually what's called adversarial, where you're fighting against somebody in court. Generally speaking, they're trying to help you out. So you probably won't face a judge. You're just going to do a short phone or Zoom meeting with a trustee. No lawyers arguing, no scary courtroom. It's quick and straightforward. Does bankruptcy appear on background checks during the employment process? This is a great question, and I actually don't know the answer to it. I thought it was one thing, but I don't want to give you the wrong answer. So I'm going to get back to you on this question. Let me actually shoot it over to my team real quickly, and I'll find out for sure. Give me 1 second to send that to them. Great question, Grubby. I love your questions here. I can tell you're really thinking through this. Grubby, I'm curious, as you're asking these questions, are you already filing? Are you considering helping somebody file? I would love to know. Love to know if that's which of those applies to you. All right, we've got time for a few more questions. If you have some, throw them in the chat. Love to answer those for you. Just sent that off to my team here. Let's see, Grubby, if they can get back with an answer. Okay, so hey, you don't hear that often. You don't know an answer to something, you don't say it. You don't get that a lot in this space. So, all right, it's important to us to tell the truth at Upsolve. Can I file bankruptcy if I am unemployed? Throw that up in the chat. Okay, so can you file bankruptcy if you're unemployed? Being unemployed might actually make you more eligible for bankruptcy. So you absolutely can file. If you're unemployed, you can't afford your bills, you're likely to pass the income portion of the means test that we talked about earlier and have sufficient income to asset or income to expense ratios to qualify for Chapter 7. So in many cases, being unemployed is actually the best time to file. I wasn't unemployed when I filed, but I've had some friends that are like, I'm waiting around for a job. I'm unemployed. When, my job eventually comes, I'll be able to pay this off. So I don't want to file bankruptcy. And I told them, like, your job might come soon. Hopefully it comes soon, but the debt is here now. So take care of the debt now. Don't wait around. Being unemployed is a great sign that bankruptcy could be a good fit for you. Okay, cool. So I got an answer as to the background check. Quick work here from the Upsolve team. So yes, bankruptcy can show up on a background check, but it depends on the type of background check that's being done. So if this is a credit check for employment, the employer question really depends on the type of employer. So if you work for and this is what I was thinking, so I'm glad I was right about this. But if you work for financial services or have a government job, or a position where you specifically handle money, they will sometimes run credit checks and your bankruptcy will appear on the credit report. So if there's a credit check portion of the background check, then that will show up. But many employers don't run that type of check. So it usually doesn't matter because usually employers don't run credit checks, especially for roles that don't involve financial responsibilities. So a standard background check isn't going to have a credit pull, and so therefore won't find a bankruptcy. The only time that it typically will show up is if there's a credit check portion of the background check. Great question and great work from the Upsolve team getting me an answer there. Thanks so much for that. Okay. Can't quite read this. 1 second. Okay. Can I file bankruptcy? Oh, we already answered that. Doubled up on the unemployment question. Here we go. There we go. Can I file bankruptcy on my own or do I need a lawyer? Hey, I feel like someone pitched me a softball here. So yeah, people worry about this. I worried about this, right? Like lawyers can cost thousands of dollars. If I had thousands of dollars, I wouldn't need to file bankruptcy. Can I do it on my own? And yes, you absolutely can file without a lawyer. I did it. Over 17,000 people that have worked with Upsolve have did it. did it. My goodness. Over 17,000 people that have worked with Upsolve have also done it. And Upsolve was built to help you do exactly that, right? Like file without a lawyer. We have a free app. It guides you through the whole process step by step. Doesn't miss any of those steps. You can make sure that you get that successful application at the end. And as I mentioned earlier, right? Like lawyers on average, 96.7% success rate. Upsolve on average, 95%. So users that work with us are very successful at filing bankruptcy applications, and it doesn't cost them anything other than the filing fees. All right, I'm helping a family member file. Awesome, Grubby. I'm really glad to hear that. I've done that as well, and it is a huge relief to be able to help them with that, because it stinks to see somebody in your family struggling with debt. And it's so awesome, such a great feeling when you can help them move forward through bankruptcy. Have a feeling a lot of people will be filing this year, learn a lot about bankruptcy. Yeah, it's tough out there in the economy right now, man. Like you go, I went to a fast food place the other day. I got 2 sandwiches and 2 coffees, and it was like $40. It's like, what in the world is going on? So yeah, people are struggling in this economy. Bankruptcy can be a great way to get back on your feet. And I agree. I think there's going to be a lot of people filing in the next year or two. All right, I'm going to keep going through these questions because they're just coming through fast and furious here. What if I filed bankruptcy before? Can I file again? So there's a clock ticking on how often you can file, and here's how it works. So you usually need to wait 8 years between Chapter 7 filings, but that clock starts from your last filing date, not your last discharge date. So double check the timeline. Okay, and Chapter 13 is going to be a little bit different. That's the timeline for Chapter 7, which is the type of bankruptcy that Upsolve helps with. All right, Cherie here, you said I should report $1,000 in income because he pays the mortgage. How do I do that? Under what category? So in the bankruptcy application, if you're working with Upsolve, there's going to be an income section. So you would list that as other, I can't remember exactly what the category is. It's like other miscellaneous. I know on taxes, it's often considered outside contribution. So there'll be a section that should jump out to you as like, oh, this is the thing where I put income that isn't income that I make from employers. I think it's fairly obvious in there. I apologize, I can't remember the exact question in the app right now. But if you get to the income section and you're not sure where it goes, there's a little help button over there. You can click that. You can get connected with a paralegal at Upsolve who can answer for sure. All right. This one, we talked about this a little bit earlier. I'm glad someone is asking this now, though. Will bankruptcy wipe out my student loans? Will bankruptcy wipe out my student loans? So this one can be really frustrating, but here's the honest truth. In most cases, no. Student loans are really hard to discharge. Less hard now than they used to be, but still really hard. There are some exceptions, but it typically requires a separate court process. Not typically, always. What am I saying? Typically. It requires a separate court process called an adversary proceeding, where you basically say like, hey, I have some unique hardship in my life, medical, physical, employment-wise. Maybe my school shut down and my degree is no longer valid, something like that. And that's causing me extreme financial hardship. Now, if that does apply to you, as I mentioned earlier in this call, the Upsolve tool will help you figure out if you can discharge that student loan debt. But for most people, unfortunately, you can't. Now, the good news is if you get rid of all of your credit card debt, paying the student loans can be a lot easier, even if you can't discharge them. All right, let's see here. Will bankruptcy affect my spouse's credit? Okay, yeah, here we go. Will bankruptcy affect my spouse's credit? So you can actually protect your spouse's credit if you file smart. We talked about this a little bit earlier. Let's dig into some more of the details. So bankruptcy only affects your spouse if you co-sign on a loan, as we mentioned earlier. Your spouse's credit won't be touched. You can file solo and keep their score intact if you don't impact or you don't include them in your bankruptcy application. Now with Upsolve, you only can file solo. If your spouse wants to file with you, you would need to file with an attorney, and we can make an evaluation referral over to an attorney for free. But if you file solo, doesn't matter, doesn't affect your spouse at all, except for any debts that you have co-signed, or excuse me, that they have co-signed on. Those debts will survive the bankruptcy. Can I include back taxes in bankruptcy? Oof. Can I include back taxes in bankruptcy? Let me think about that for a second. Yes, but only if your tax debt meets a few key rules. So, some income taxes that are at least 3 years old may be dischargeable, but newer taxes, payroll taxes, and things like fraud penalties, those usually stick around as relates to your bankruptcy and your back taxes. Question: how long does it take to file bankruptcy with Upsolve? I love this question. So it took me, when I filed bankruptcy, 6 months. And then when I was done with my forms, it took me 2 more months to get up the courage to actually file them. Not so with Upsolve. You don't need weeks, you don't need months, you just need a free evening and a laptop. Most people finish their forms in 2 to 5 hours. You can save your progress, you can take breaks, and file when you're ready. We guide you through every step of the process. Now, when you're done with your forms, typically our paralegal team will review them and release them to you to file within 2 weeks. It's often faster than that. I've seen it go as fast as like 4 or 5 days. It really just depends on how responsive you are when they ask questions and the type of application that you had. Should I avoid credit cards after filing bankruptcy? Avoiding credit cards completely can actually hurt your score. So I'm glad you're asking this question. After bankruptcy, responsibly using a credit card, especially a secured credit card, is one of the fastest ways to rebuild your credit. You don't need to be afraid of credit. You just need to use it intentionally. Now, I was actually joking with somebody on my team about this earlier today. I very often go on vacations for free because I have credit cards that have points. I pay for most of my expenses on my credit card. I pay my credit card off every single month in full, so I never pay interest. And I accrue all those points, which can be amazing. It can allow you to do things like travel much more than you thought you could if you can build up those points. So be careful with your credit, but don't be afraid of credit. You need it to do things like buy a house or buy a car at a good rate. And so rebuilding it responsibly after bankruptcy can make or break your financial future. And of course, Upsolve has tools to help you do that as well. Right now, we have a lot of long form articles, videos that explain how to build credit after bankruptcy. But, fun plug here, we're also going to be releasing a tool in the next month or so that will walk you through doing things like getting secured credit cards or filing disputes on your credit report to boost your credit, or reporting your rent to the bureaus to help boost your credit score. A lot of things you can do, and we're here to help you with those as often as we can. Can I rent an apartment after filing bankruptcy? I feel like this is sort of the question we had earlier, but let's dive into it a little bit more. So, absolutely, you can. Here's how people make it happen all the time. So, bankruptcy might show up on your rental history, but it won't stop you from renting. Some landlords might ask for a larger deposit or a cosigner on your rent application, but many won't care as long as your income is steady and your application is strong. I never once had a problem getting an apartment after filing bankruptcy. Next question here. How soon can I buy a house after filing for bankruptcy? Another one that I love. So I'm in a house that I bought after filing bankruptcy right now. So not only can you can do it faster than you think you can. You don't have to wait 10 years. Far from it. Most people can actually qualify for an FHA mortgage 2 years after they get a Chapter 7 discharge. If you've rebuilt your credit and finances, it can be even easier. You might be able to get a conventional mortgage. It's not a forever delay. It's a reset. I got a conventional mortgage at a great rate. Let's see, this would have been 7 years after I originally filed my bankruptcy. And my credit score was back over 700 within like a year and a half of filing bankruptcy. So you definitely can still get a mortgage in the future. And you're not going to be confined to terrible rates unless the economy just continues to be such that we have terrible mortgage rates. Okay. Will I have to give up my personal belongings in a bankruptcy? People often imagine their stuff is going to be hauled away by the court in bankruptcy. Like I know I did. I was like, oh, like there goes my, I don't know, mom's cherished precious memories box or something like that. Doesn't happen. What am I talking about? Cherished memories box. I don't know what I'm saying. But yeah, doesn't work like that typically in bankruptcy. No one's coming for your couch or your clothes. Most personal items are protected under exemption laws. In fact, the vast majority of Chapter 7 cases are what's called a no asset case, which means that you don't lose anything because from the court's perspective, you have no assets that the trustee could take to sell to repay your creditors because all of them covered by those bankruptcy exemptions. All right, another question here from Grubby. Do you have to wait exactly 90 days before your last credit card payment to file? No, you don't. You definitely, this is a good question. So let me get at what's behind Grubby's question here. So when you file bankruptcy, there is what's called a presumption of abuse if you have, say, racked up a ton of money on credit cards prior to filing. Because obviously, like if you go buy like 30 laptops or something like that and then file bankruptcy, the trustee is going to be like, seems like maybe you're abusing the system. Generally speaking, if you're working with Upsolve and you go through our process, you're not going to be that person. However, there is a question about when you can have made the most recent payment to see if you, say, preferenced or prioritized some bank or another in this process. Because creditors all want to get paid back, right? And there's a limited amount of money to pay them back. So let's say you paid Bank of America back, but you didn't pay Chase back. Chase is going to say, well, like, what the heck? I should get paid back. Now, it's the trustee's responsibility to determine whether or not, there should be some division of assets to repay somebody that you didn't pay, but often it doesn't happen. So if you're current on all of your cards, I wouldn't worry about this. I wouldn't worry about the 90-day count. But if you paid an enormous amount of money to one creditor and not to the others, then it might be tricky. That would be a situation where it's good to talk to an attorney before filing bankruptcy, and you can do that for free through the Upsolve tool. All right, we have Pina. So we said, what's Donald Trump's tariff going to do for business? Will this increase bankruptcy? Well, I don't want to get into the politics or the economics of this. Like, I'm neither a politician nor an economist. I've heard that tariffs tend to increase prices on consumer goods. Makes sense, right? Costs more money to bring them into the States. You respond to that by increasing the price on those things, which means people pay more for them. If you're paying more money and you don't have more money, you're going to rack up more debt, and it likely will increase bankruptcy filings. We've already seen bankruptcy filings go up this year in response to economic pressures, so it would stand to reason that if those prices continue going up, we would see more bankruptcies. Thanks for that question. All right. Awesome, Sheree. Your questions were answered. You're going to be using Upsolve. Your only option. Amazing. Attorney wanted $500 deposit for $2,300 total. This makes me so happy, Sheree. Thanks for sharing this. Yeah, it's so much more affordable to do this on your own, especially if you're struggling with debt. Who has $2,300? I don't think I have $2,300 to spend on a legal service right now, much less back when I was really struggling with debt. So really happy to hear that, Sheree. Please let us know if you have any questions as you're filing. If I own a company and it goes bankrupt, is everyone on the board responsible for the debt? Oh man, love that. So we'll. I like the joke here. So yeah, if you own a company and it goes bankrupt, is everybody on the board responsible for the debt? So this would be related to business debt, which is different than consumer debt. I only work with consumer debt at Upsolve. Typically speaking, though, if somebody has a fiduciary responsibility for the company's expenses, they can receive liability. Now, in past life, I did go to law school, as you see from my law degree up here. Not a lawyer, not practicing lawyer. But what I remember from questions related to business finance is that as long as you've maintained a sufficient separation between the business's finance and your personal and the board's personal finances, the board and its fiduciaries are protected from the liabilities of the company coming back on them, unless there's been like fraud or something like that. But again, not a business lawyer. Encourage you to research that further. That's not a type of bankruptcy that Upsolve works with. Can you explain cumulative interest to me? I feel like this is one of my friends trolling me about compound interest. So yeah, I'll talk about compound interest because I think it's actually really important. So if you are in debt, you're paying interest on that debt to, say, Bank of America. So let's say you owe Bank of America $10,000. You have a 20% interest rate. You're going to be paying them $2,000 a year or more in interest. So if you instead, so let's take a quick look at that. So that's going to compound over time, right? Because after first year, you have $2,000 of interest that's accumulated. The second year, you now have $12,000 of debt, right? You have that $10,000 initial, you have the $2,000 on top of that. Next year, that compounds again, and you have more and more and more over time. So basically, what compound interest is your interest earns more interest, and then that interest earns more interest. And eventually you have way more money than you actually invested. And it works in reverse too. If you're paying interest on your debt, that's going to compound over time and you're going to have less money as time goes on. So one of the best reasons to get out of debt quickly is so that your money can start earning you interest instead of earning the banks that you owe money to interest and keeping you in debt. Another question in here. Somebody owes your company money. What legal methods can I use to get this money back? Yeah, definitely not a consumer bankruptcy question. Unfortunately, I would suggest that you talk with an attorney about that question. All right, going to go through a couple more here. Can bankruptcy help with my medical debt? Tons and tons of engagement on this. I appreciate everybody that came into this webinar today. Can bankruptcy help with medical debt? So this is actually the number one reason that people file for bankruptcy. And yes, it absolutely does help. So medical bills are considered unsecured debt. We didn't talk about the distinction here. Secured means you have property that guarantees that loan. So this would be a thing like a car loan or a mortgage. Secured loan is not dischargeable in bankruptcy. Unsecured loans like credit cards, medical bills, payday loans, things like that, those are fully dischargeable in Chapter 7. Bankruptcy clears them out completely. You don't have to make any payment on those moving forward. And you don't have a payment plan unless you're in a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. So medical debt, absolutely dischargeable in bankruptcy. I'm getting all sorts of troll questions in the chat here, coming in with Johnny Sins. I love it. So let me jump in this last question and I'll have time for one more if anybody has one here. Okay. What is the biggest benefit of using Upsolve over hiring a lawyer? It's not just about saving money. It's actually about owning your fresh start. And this is something that I think often gets missed in these conversations. So if you work with a lawyer, great, you get a fresh start. But if you do this on your own, what I've found from working with a lot of people who file bankruptcy, I definitely found this myself, is that when you do this on your own, when you do the work, take the time to dig yourself out of debt through bankruptcy, you feel empowered, right? Like you didn't accrue an additional $1,500 plus in expenses from attorney fees. You understand what's going on with your money. You did a legal process, which can be really difficult to do, right? Like how often do people do a legal process on their own? You get out of debt. You have that success. You've done this on your own. You did it quickly. You did it for free if you qualify for that with Upsolve. And you did it in such a way that regular people aren't able to do. You took control of your finances, and that can be so empowering, and it can put you on the path to future financial success. All right, we got one more. I'll do this last one in here. Not going to do this one. Another joke question. I would love to know who this is that keeps jumping into this chat and trolling me. I have my suspicions, but all right. So before we wrap up, I want to leave you with this. Bankruptcy is a tool. It's a legal tool. It's here for a reason. It's to give people like you and like me a fresh start when life doesn't go as planned, which, let's face it, when does it go as planned? So if you're ready to take the next step and you want to get out of debt, head over to upsolve.org. You can start your free eligibility screener there, and you can begin that journey towards a debt-free life today. If you found this webinar helpful, do me a favor. First thing, like it. Second, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Third, follow us on social media for more tools, stories, and tips like this. Thanks for coming tonight. Thanks for all the questions. This is the most questions we've gotten in quite a while. If you're struggling with debt, remember, you're not alone. You can do this, and we're here to help you every step of the way. Come back next Monday for another webinar, and we'll see you then. Thanks, everybody.